forest where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long.
I would like to get started in 1 minute. If we can find our seats, please. We'll get going right on time. Thank you very much. Pour some water here. So you're in charge today, Steph. Well, good morning, everyone. I make the time 9 o'clock. Welcome back, day 2. I am somewhat optimistic that we may have this budget finished today, but I don't know. If not, we certainly have tomorrow set aside to conclude, hopefully. Yesterday, we went through 6 tabs. We have 6 left to go, so I think we're in pretty good shape time-wise. A couple of things before we get right to page 4-59. That's where we'll be starting in a few moments. So if you want to get your binder open to page 4-59, the summary for development and cultural services. I want to say thank you, Mr. Bill Jackson, for volunteering to do our broadcast today. I have my cell phone on silent, so I'm in good shape. I want to thank Norview staff for the lunch they prepared us yesterday. I forgot to say that yesterday. I will say it now. It was very delicious, so we appreciate that. Mr. James Johnson, I want to, before we get to page 459, turn things over to you. I think you have a couple things for us to consider before we get to Chris Baird's department, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are 2 items that we wanted to inform council of this morning before we get started. There was a report done last week regarding the minimum wage through Bill 148, and through that report there was an adjustment of approximately 89,000 that we haven't incorporated in our list here yet. Have not, so Chris Everett is going to add that for us today and revise the numbers. So the actual amount was 89,200.
And that, Mr. Johnson, has already been approved, that staff report by council, so we'll just put that, I see Kathy's ahead of me, so that automatically goes up, and that's a further reduction. Continue, sir.
The next item is a motion regarding the Ministry of Health, the Medical Officer of Health, and I'm not sure if that motion is ready or not, and perhaps Ms. Miranda can speak to it.
I believe what the Medical Officer's Health, the position is vacant, so you're saying there is probably some savings there to realize at this time? I think that's what you're telling me.
So that amount, the Norfolk share, is 51,200. So we will also add that on to our list.
Do we need a motion? I think I would like to have a motion that we reduce that line budget by 51,200, our levy portion. Marlene, anything you want to just say before we go there? Is that fair?
We have to go into Board of Health.
Okay, we got to go into Board of Health for that, so I'm going to recess council at this time and put our Board of Health hats on.
Sure.
So we can deal with that right now and not forget it.
We also have some wording that was kind of from yesterday about the letter to the minister
Under the Board of Health?
under the Board of Health.
Okay, well, let me deal with this first. That's why We did what we did yesterday. We can just move back and forth on a whim here. So we are now sitting at the Board of Health. Councillor Columbus.
So, Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chairman, can we, I'll make the motion that we reduce the budget by that amount.
$51,200. I'll need a seconder. Councillor Black, please. Any discussion on reducing the Board of Health? And this is levy dollars, so that will affect our budget. Go ahead, Councillor Oliver, to the motion, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the proposed Board of Health budget here, and it showed $96,900. That would have been the full annual cost, I guess. Is that the point? So just trying to relate to the number that James has given us, 50,000 plus Haldeman's share of whatever it'll be, another 20 or so. It doesn't quite equate to what we've got here. So our staff, assuming we'd have this position filled, say, in the fourth quarter, or what assumption are we making? I fully support it, but what assumption are we making to be comfortable reducing this budget by 50,000?
So through the Mayor to Councillor Oliver, we're making the assumption that early spring we will be successful in recruiting a medical officer of health. Early spring of 2018? That is correct. We are in the process of recruitment, and we're reviewing applications currently, and should shortly have interviews and proceed from there.
So our levy share of the total cost of 1 quarter of a year for this position in this program is the 50,000 that we're talking about.
So through the Mayor to Councillor Oliver, I'm just going to have Finance confirm the numbers, just so we ensure that the math is correct.
Yeah, okay. Because, Mr. Mayor, in our budget, we didn't show any annualized amount. It was strictly a 96,900, so.
This is annualized budget impact.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, you suggested 51,200. Do you stick by that, or is that a little bit high?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, why don't we use that for now? And
Okay.
Kathy and her crew will confirm the numbers and get some clarification on it, and just to make sure we double check, and then we'll be able to let you know hopefully by break.
All right, we'll just leave that in the motion there. Any other discussion on the motion? Motion then to reduce by 51,200. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Anything further, Mr. Johnson, on Board of Health? No. I will now recess the Board of Health meeting, and I will open again our council budget session. Mr. Johnson, anything else on Norfolk budget at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, there's
Thank you.
nothing else.
Appreciate that. I'm on page 4-59. Good morning, Mr. Baird. I'm going to turn things over to you to start things off with some comments if you have some.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Good morning, council members. Let's start off on the right foot here. It gives me an opportunity to give you some year-end figures from Mr. Enslin's department and Ms. Dusling's. Lots of activity on the development front. We finished the year at $142 million in construction value, slightly up than what was projected in the third quarter. Over the last 12 months, there were 398 new homes added to our tax roll and over 1,300 permits. So it was the best year ever. We're expecting another strong year ahead, 2018. I want to thank you for your support over the last 12 months, and particularly back in late summer when you endorsed the expansion of our staff complement to directly deal with the development challenges we were having, the backlog of projects and the timelines. As a result, we've added 7.5 FTEs. 2 of those were transfers from Lee Robinson's area, Public Works, and of course, Eva Brooke Donnelly. So those 2 areas, Eva Brooke Donnelly, bringing that in under our Heritage and Culture fold, and the new Development Engineering Division, are the main drivers of our budget proposed here in 2018. That represents 92% of the increase. So essentially, our budget coming forward is a $53,000 increase over last year, and there's a number of projects we can speak about going forward. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank Diane Hopkins. She's our financial advisor. Diane works with Mr. Johnson and his team, and she plays a really important role helping us get to today. So thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Mr. Baird, and certainly the increases you highlighted here are no surprise to this council, or they should not be. They were changes initiated by staff and council and approved. Okay, the summary, of course, is on 59 and 60. I would like to go, first of all, if we may, Mr. Baird, to the administration on 4-63. We'll go through these sections and see if there's questions.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just provide a comment, and it might
Please.
stimulate some discussion. Really, the big change here, we've allocated some of the salaries and benefits over to Mr. Anslin's building budget, which we're permitted to do. So we do see a reduction in salaries and benefits as well as a proportional FTE. But the one new budget initiative that's shown here, if you see, it's $50,000, and it's what we're calling the Norfolk Urban Renewal Partnership Fund. And Councillor Height raised that question yesterday in light of the announcement from the province. It talked about $82,000 coming. So we did somewhat anticipate that, although the figure was unknown, and this would contribute directly towards our 50% share. So we have, by budgeting $50,000, we have the possibility of leveraging almost $170,000 that we can put into our downtowns.
Excellent.
The shortfall there, because we don't have exactly that matching dollar, but we will go to our business partners, the BIAs, the Chambers of Commerce, the Board of Trade, see if we can bump that up a bit.
Well,
and then
33,000
we'll all
short,
benefit
so
from
you'll
that.
work at that.
Correct, yeah. So that's really the only thing to identify in this administration section.
Appreciate that. I have Height and Black. Go ahead, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to Mr. Baird. We're short $32,575 for our share. Shouldn't we put that in there and then go after the Chamber and the BIAs for additional contributions? Wouldn't that make more sense?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Height, you're absolutely correct. That would be great to at least have the county share match. Unfortunately, we didn't know the exact amount. You're right, we could leverage even further. That's a decision that council has to make. It's not one that I am recommending at this point, but you make a very good question there.
So why wouldn't you recommend it?
Bottom line, I know your objective and my objective as a taxpayer too.
I got you. I'm going to recommend it, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to put the motion on the floor that we add $32,575 to that because we'll just be doing it later if we don't do it now.
Councillor Black, you have seconded. Councillor Black, go ahead. Motion on the floor to the motion.
Just speaking to the motion in favor of it, it's a long time coming. I'm glad that the province has recognized the need for renewal and is willing to put some money forward, matching, albeit matching dollars. But a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris. I did speak to the BIA, Simcoe BIA, yesterday, and they took it as very good news. Jim McGimsey and the chairman, Jim Carroll, and Vice Chair Brenda Lee Engelhardt. And Brenda Lee asked me that I guess she was in conversation with Clark and Hoskins, and there may have been the possibility of pursuing or an amendment that we weren't getting our fair share here compared to others, and that there was a possibility of maybe getting more. I just wondered if Chris knew anything about that, if there was a possibility of that 82 and change going up.
Through the Mayor, we were surprised when we looked at some of our comparators. They seem to be getting more than Norfolk County. Without knowing the exact method of determining what dollar, right to the $5 mark, what we were going to be getting. We really don't know yet. We would like to get more, but seeing that those figures are all in ink now, I don't know if it's going to be a challenge to try to go back to the ministry and seek some sort of adjustment otherwise. They do mention a multi-year project, so perhaps there's maybe more consideration next time. But in many of these funds, as Mr. Johnson would indicate, not every municipality will perhaps use their full amount. They may not be able to match their 50-50, and so it may carry forward for future years. There may be more in the pot, but we'll definitely take advantage of that.
Well, it all sounds very positive. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the motion. We've been talking about Main Street downtown renewal. I know there was even a number in the budget last year that got taken out, didn't go anywhere. So the other thing, we've had this business incentive program for looking
Facade?
at facade improvement, that Mr. Bear's department, and I don't know where that is right now, but I think it's a good move to inject some dollars there, being that the province is prepared to help out on 50-cent dollars. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I came this morning prepared to fight in support of the $50,000 new budget initiative amount, knowing that it was matching. I don't think I'm going to support the motion. I think it's pretty important for the BIAs and chambers of commerce across the county to have some skin in the game in this exercise. And I think they'll realize that for their 32,000 spread over the entire county, it's going to attract another 120,000. So 25 cents on the dollar is all they would have to invest in order to have all of this provincial allocation made available to our county. So I think it's a great project. I'm glad staff brought it forward. It was serendipitous that they knew this provincial money was probably going to be announced, and how could we turn that down? But I do think it's important for the private sector, for the downtown business community to be involved. So I suggest we leave our investment for this year at the $50,000 that's in the budget.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'll be not supporting the motion. I can't speak for all the communities in Norfolk County, but I can say that the business community in Port Dover, while it appears that they are flush, that is not the case at all. I attend most of the Port Dover Board of Trade meetings, and money is a problem. And to suggest that they can come up with an extra $5,000 even, it's going to be difficult for them. So it's easy for us to sit around this table because we have taxpayers. They don't. So I'll not be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Just in regards to what Councillor Oliver has said, I can tell you that the Downtown Simcoe BIA, they do have a budget and a session, and they could and would be willing to ante up some dollars. Even if council puts forward this extra amount, it assures that the money is there. That could be reduced by the contributions. That's not to say that, by putting this money in, that they should not be anteing up any dollars. I can assure you that the Downtown Simcoe BIA will contribute some money to this, whether you put it up or not.
Ready for the question? Any further discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Andy, please.
That $32,578 be added to the Urban Renewal Fund to set the total investment for the new budget initiative at $82,578.
32,575. It's okay. Won't worry about the $3. Any other discussion? Those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Brunn?
I think we have to, and this, I'm speaking regarding the Simcoe BIA, but the Chamber and the BIA are now a combined entity. And we're not talking about just the Simcoe BIA. We're talking about the Chamber, which involves a lot of other businesses, I guess. It goes out on the highway. So I think it's a great idea. So I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm ready to call the question. If there's no further discussion, those in favor of supporting the motion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and myself included is 6. Those opposed, and that is 3. So the motion is carried that we bump that 50,000 to 82,575. Thank you, Mr. Baird. Back to 463. Anything else on administration? We'll now go to community planning. Please feel free to go back there if you wish. Page 4-67.
Mr. Mayor, this is where the chickens come home to roost. This is We don't have a new development engineering budget page. We will next year. So for the time being, those that council-approved initiative for the staff and et cetera has fallen under this budget for discussion purposes this morning. You'll see the council-approved initiatives of $610,900. And there's also a new NBI, new budget initiative for $400,000, of which $324,000 is funded from reserve. And that relates to the Dover West secondary plan and also the official plan continuation.
A question I have before I entertain others, this $400,000 new initiative, is this the amount covers all 4 salaries?
Sorry, the 400,000 I just spoke of is for the studies.
Just for the
Dover
studies?
West and OP. If you look in the council-approved initiative line, the column prior, that's where the majority of the costs are associated with the new development engineering division, which you're correct, includes the 4 FTEs.
Yeah, so it's in the salary and benefits, pardon me, I said the wrong title. So my question then is, when we did deal with this, I believe it was early last summer or late spring, can't remember, we had council, at least in my impression, we had assurance that the increase in fees that we are getting from building permits, from applications for rezoning and site plans would more than enough cover these new positions, Mr. Baird. I think, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement, Mr. Mayor. You'll see fees and service charges under the revenue line increasing by $314,000. So that's where that's shown.
Okay, that's the offset.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. To council, anything, questions on community planning? Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Under other revenues, there was a target of $56,000 and we got 0. And I see there's a budget item for $20,000. We missed that one. What happened there?
Just bear with me. I'll drill into my budget here.
It's okay. Bottom of page 467.
4-67. Under
The
other
other
revenues.
revenues last year, there was no revenue, but there was a budgeted for 56. Good question.
What that is for, Councillor Height, is many times large-scale developments say we have to get a marketing study done. We will pay for that marketing study and we will recoup those costs from the applicant. So it's an in and out. So although we wanted to put a placeholder in there, but the fact that we didn't have to spend anything, sorry, let me clarify that. The approved budget was $56,100 last year, and we're showing that as a reduction. We're not getting those big in and outs anymore, so it's been reduced to $20,100.
So since it was 0, can we remove the 20,000 as the placeholder?
That's a good question. I'd maybe defer to Mr. Johnson if it can go into the negative and then come back to the 0. I don't know if that helps one way or the other. So it is recovery of consulting costs, and those again would be paid for by the county and recouped by a payment from the developer. James, is there an opportunity to just maybe zero that out and go in and out as a negative? If you're following me, other revenues under community planning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer Mr. Baird's question, that there's an offsetting expenditure as well in the top half of that. It's just absorbed within the line items. So if we were to zero that out, we would also have to reduce the expenditure. So what the 20,000 represents is what we anticipate to do in 2018 and the recovery that Mr. Baird has also said. So I recommend that we leave that in.
Revenue and expenditure on this page just
They already
result in
would cancel
0.
it, yeah.
Okay.
Right, I see that it resolves in 0. It just seems like a wasted number if you ask me, but okay.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like, and this will probably be from James rather than Chris, but on the Dover West neighborhood study again, he mentioned, I asked about this yesterday, that the large bulk of this cost will be covered from reserves. and that as of, I think you said, James, as of 2015 or 2016 year-end statements, that reserve was in the red, but will go into the black over the course of the 10-year plan. Am I remembering that correctly? In other words, probably today, that reserve is in the red, or will be certainly if this charge is applied to it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oliver, you are pretty much correct, yes. Actually, the 2016 balance was approximately 200,000 in the black. Yes. However, what we don't have in that forecast is this project. However, we are doing the development charge study as we speak, and we want to incorporate this project into the development charges. So we anticipate the 10-year forecast of that particular reserve to be in the black.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton, please.
Yeah, just on that, and my question through you to James. James, with all the activity we've had last year, Chris, how much do we bring in the capital charges, like the lot levies, I call them? How much of that, you said, I think we built 384 homes or 389 homes? Or?
Sure, if I could, Mr. Mayor, while James, so 398 new homes. Development charges are different if it's a one-bedroom apartment or if it's a single-family home. The single-family homes it's approximately $15,000. So let's just pretend we built 398 new single-family homes. We would be levying $15,000 per lot. That's almost $6 million that would be brought in last year as an example, that would be from development charges. How Mr. Johnson allocates that to different areas, could be Parks and Recreation, it could be fire, could be general government, libraries, that sort of thing. I think that's what he could perhaps speak to, the fact that the study portion has got X amount of dollars in, but we are bringing in a significant amount of money each year.
Microphone, please. Sorry, Doug.
Can you give me a figure? Like what, I mean, it comes in, but how you distribute it, I'm not concerned about that, but there's got to be a total income for those 398 homes, big and small, I would think.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunton, I wouldn't be able to calculate that figure probably by the end of the day today. It's as Mr. Baird mentioned, it could be, we'd have to really look at what the development charges are per unit, single-family home versus condos and things of that nature. When we do have the 2017 year end, in the financial statements, there is a development charge line item in there where you can see what the balances are year over year, and it'll be able to give you your information then.
So that's what I mean. So there is a total. I mean, it comes in as a total, and then it's dispersed to the different departments or reserve funds or whatever, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, you are correct. We collect the dollars.
Right.
And then it's all based on the bylaw, and we will be doing a new development charges bylaw this year. And so you'll be able to get more information once we do that. And it all depends on the 10-year forecast of the projects that are growth related and so on and so forth. And then Watson and Associates is the consultant we have that are doing the study. They are able to put all the numbers together on which reserves get populated based on the development charges per household, and we'll be able to give you the balances. We did have a development charge report to council in July, I believe, of this year that identified all the contributions to the respective reserves.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle on, and I'm maybe even 16, like there's X number of dollars coming in, and there's X number of dollars going out through different reserve funds. And I'm just, I don't have that report anymore. I'm going to look it up maybe, but I'd like to know what it was. And I mean, if it's a prosperous year, I don't know what we built in 2016. Because, how do I put it? Is it going out quicker than it's coming in? And if we have a slack year in the building, then that's going to slow down the contributions to the reserves, correct? So there's 2016 figure available?
Mr. Mayor, in 2016, 389 units. Last year, 398. 389. In 2016, 398. We are trending upward.
So there will be a figure. Can I get that figure for 2016 from you?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunton, I can bring up that report and perhaps by break, I can even show you at break if you like, and
Yeah, okay,
show
thank
you
you.
what those figures are.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 4-67? I'm then going to move to the Building Division on 4-70, 0% net levy requirement based on expenditure increase of 10% roughly, and expenditures also to make this a 0%. Councillor Oliver, on this page, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 4-68, Chris, or Fritz, or both, I guess, I was struck by the second bullet under upcoming main objectives. Over 400 new building code amendments in 2008. I did attend a session back in November at the Municipal West AMO conference in London on the building code, and yes, there are a lot of updates, but that's a pretty staggering number. My question, I guess, Mr. Mayor, is how many of those would be what you would call, Fritz, substantive changes to the standards, or are they all mostly little housekeeping, if you like?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you did attend the AMO, and there was some updates from the ministry with regards to proposed amendments. There were new amendments that were added this year in January, and there's a whole new set of amendments that are coming through a new building code in 2019. So these were just amendments this year. Next year, there's actually going to be a new Ontario Building Code entirety for 2019. Those amendments are really primarily around the climate change initiative by the ministries, electric vehicle plug-in stations, energy efficiencies in homes, insulation. There's a number of changes with regards to energy efficiency requirements for the homes, but the electric charging stations is probably one of the bigger ones. There's various changes, that are just housekeeping changes, just some wording, some dimensions, some changes to numbering and grammar. But the biggest changes are as a result of the climate change initiative by the ministry.
Anything further? Mr. Johnson, then Mr. Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you don't mind, I'd like to answer Councillor Brunton's question
I don't mind.
right now, because I was able to find it quicker than I thought. So in that report that went to council, there was a nice summary that identified there are 10 different development charge reserves out there that we use. And the opening balance at the beginning of 16 was about $6.5 million. And then that grew to $8.5 million at the end of 16. So those are 2016 figures. I anticipate 17 to be similar, just through virtue of the growth that we're having, and then hopefully with the development charge study, we'll be identify more projects that we can use with these fees, and then to build up those reserves even further. So the opening amount for January 1st, 2016 was $6,477,000, and then it closed with the contributions less the uses that we used for projects that year, closed at $8,479,000.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at 468, the second bullet from the bottom, improve efficiency of using mobile devices for all inspections to provide building inspectors with the necessary tools to easily access our permit tracking system remotely in real time from the field using a smartphone or tablet. Fritz, could you expand on how that works and what's the time saving with this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We all know that technology changes very quickly. If we have devices 2 years ago, chances are they're probably getting outdated with wireless. Our inspectors are primarily on the road. We'd like them to be. We'd like them to do the reporting, inspections, any administrative function, note-taking, writing inspection reports, to do that on-site at the real time, so that they don't have to come back to the office to do it the next day. They may, it's fresh in their mind when they're on the job site, so we're working towards having them put the documentation and the information in at real time, and to be able to communicate with the contractors and the applicants via their remote devices through email or through other means. Our City View program is set up to do that, so we can email the contractor, the applicant directly from their mobile devices. If there's deficiencies, they can take photographs of the deficiencies, email it to the contractor immediately. They can send inspection reports right from their handheld devices without having to come back to the office the following day. So certainly that's the direction we're going. Providing efficiencies. It takes a lot of travel time to go back and forth to the office to do the work. If we can get them to do that on the job site at real time, then that's the efficiency we're looking for.
Sounds like a great move. What's the value of this investment in the mobile devices that you've got in the budget here?
Through the mayor, it's actually in the IT department. I was just talking to Mr. Slichenkov. That's included in their budget that was reviewed by you yesterday. It's approximately $50,000. Yeah, $50,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. General question to Mr. Ensland, if I could, please. Fritz, you mentioned all the changes and amendments to the building code. Do you know when the building code came into existence? When did we start regulating the building industry? Like if a house was built 100 years ago, the carpenter just used some common sense and put up a building. When did we actually start with a code?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the actual Ontario Building Code, I believe, was 1976. But prior to the Ontario Building Code, building regulations were governed under the municipal bylaws. So each municipality had bylaws related to building construction. In 1976, the ministry introduced the first Ontario Building Code.
Okay. The reason I'm asking, Mr. Mayor, is because all our decisions and discussion about Hastings Drive, you know, all those tar paper shacks blew off of log foundations long before there was a building code. And now we've declared it a hazard zone on those regulations. Things have changed, you know. I'm suggesting we could build anything we want on Hastings Drive using today's building code. So that's just my comment. It's a discussion for another time. Thank you.
Councillor Black.
Mayor, I wondered if you allow me just to comment on Councillor Columbus's remarks and question to Fritz. Back in year 2000, I was the planning transition chairman, and interestingly, we talked about these devices back then and how they would increase the efficiency of this department and many other departments. The whole idea of mobile devices and not having to go back and forth to the office and being able to access files, you know, in a mobile way. So it's increasing the level of service. And I guess I was overly optimistic at the time in 2000, thinking in 2001 we'd have all these in place. And here we are in 2018. Finally, it's here, and I think it's an absolutely fantastic improvement, and will improve the service for all of our clients. I am positive of it.
Anything else on building? Let's go to page 4-73.
Just a few comments here as you're turning your pages. Yeah, we have a reduction in our legal services. Mr. Krebs explained that yesterday. Here's an example, $11,700. What was in bylaw legal services is now transferred over to the county solicitor's budget. There's an adjustment there under the expenditure line. This budget does include $40,000 for the feline TNR, trap neuter release program. That is included in this figure. And also, something else to think about, Mr. Enslin, in this area, we have contracted school crossing guards, and of course, with the minimum wage, we have a contract right now that pins that down, but we know it will be coming due, so later in the year, for the last half, for the fall school season, we can probably anticipate some impact there. But also something I wanted to share with you, we talk about the canine control, that program, and historically it's about $65,000 a year, and up until most recently, we would generate about $75,000 or $80,000 a year in dog tags sales. That was great. It was not really a moneymaker, but it broke even. We're seeing a real downward trend, and right now for 2018, got about only half of it, about 46% of the cost of that program is covered by the sale of dog tags. So the levy is picking up, almost $35,000 for this program. So it begs a question, should we be in this business? We know we've tried to, really get out and beat the pavement, try to get people to buy their dog tags. It is a challenge, but it is an area where it's starting to become more of a cost center than perhaps it should be. But that may be for discussion later in the year or for another council, but I just wanted to share that with you. That is having an impact as our revenues are going down.
Well, Mr. Baird, that was my very first question. I'll get to you, Councillor Columbus, in just a second. I want to avoid this morning having a half-hour debate on whether we should be in the dog licensing business or not. And without putting the county manager on the spot, Mr. Cribbs, seems to me in a previous discussion at council, this is something that you felt could be looked at sometime down the road, the effectiveness of the whole process we're in with dog licensing. Do you wish to comment, or maybe I'm not interpreting? We had a previous discussion at council, I think, about our dog licensing process and the fact that how effective is it?
Admittedly, council controls its own process, but that being said, there is more work to be done on this file, and this is one of those discussions that's more philosophical and service-oriented than it is financial. I mean, to be really abundantly frank on that matter, and in the context of a budget discussion is really not the right place to get into a fundamental philosophical discussion about how that service is going to be provided. So I would, in essence, support the mayor's position on that. I think you're better off just looking at the numbers for now, if that's acceptable given what you've already approved or not, and have a future date on how we go forward with dealing with dogs and cats in this community.
Mr. Baird, just my last thing to get my mind around, and when I look at this budget, my reaction was the expenditures is really well done. Not that the revenues aren't well done, but the outcome from the revenues is where the issue is here. And you're saying that we have dropped in this budget $43,000 just from the canine alone from what we previously had last year in revenues, correct? 43,000?
That's correct. That's what our,
Okay, so
our budget's showing.
that's half of the 86.4 sorry, yeah. Okay, I got it. I start with Columbus, Oliver, and Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I have raised this dog tax sales issue for the past 17 years. Anyway, I think we should probably give some direction to, as the county manager said, to get us a report on some options here. And I'd like to know what other municipalities are doing to implement their program, or maybe they've abandoned it. Hard to say. But maybe we can glean some input from other municipalities on how they're handling this same exercise.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether it'll be some good news or not, but when I read this report on the weekend, I don't know that it'll change the percentage on the screen, but I did go in Monday morning and pay my $25 for my dog tag. I'd forgotten.
It's a help. It's a start. It's a start. There's So you may be in the minority, not the majority of dog owners, I don't really know. Councillor Brunton?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I welcome the report. I just have one question. Do we have any provincial mandate to look after dogs at all? Is there any provincial legislation on it?
Mr. Cribbs?
The Municipal Act 2001 establishes that animal control is purely a municipal responsibility. It has been since time immemorial. Like, the province has never done that. It's like parking. That being said, it doesn't require you to, it's just that it is a municipal responsibility. It doesn't set out service standards. So those vary enormously around Ontario, from sort of Cadillacs to K cars. And all
So
everything in
what
between.
I'm getting at is, if we said we're not doing it anymore, the dog pound and interkip would be out of business? Is that how we? No, I'm not. I'm just trying to, if we have to have some form of program, that's all I'm asking. So, anyways.
Mr. Baird?
I think to add to Mr. Cribb's comment, we don't have to do it, but we're permitted to do it under the Municipal Act. And you're correct, that's part of that moral question that was suggested that will form part of a report. If we decide not to do it, who's going to do it? Who's going to pick up the slack? You know?
Councillor Height? Sorry, Councillor Brunton, I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay, Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'm on page 4-71 in the summary.
Thank you.
I see our bylaw complaints received are going down considerably, but more considerably going down is the bylaw complaints resolved. There was only 115 resolved this year. What's going on?
Through the mayor, that's a good observation, Councillor Height. Just as a percentage, it's 20%. Compared to 2016, we were 83%. It could just be, in general terms, when the complaints come in and we haven't quite resolved them. It was as of September 30th, so we don't really have a year-end figure. But we only have 5 municipal law enforcement officers, and our population grows. The issues become more complex. In the perfect world, there'd be no complaints. Everything would get along, and we'd be out of work. But they are becoming more and more challenging, as certainly you see in the media. They do take more time to resolve. Just a general comment, I can't really answer that specific.
Okay, so would it be a safe assumption that our 5 people do, 120 complaints per year? Based on these figures here, that's what I'm kind of seeing, 125, 120?
Yeah, I mean, we don't performance manage them. Sometimes it could be as easy as a complaint about snow on the sidewalk. Got a few of those last weekend. That can be easily resolved with Mother Nature or just a quick phone call. But included in those figures are really complex issues, enforcement code issues and things like that end up going to court. They count as one. Mm-hmm. It's hard to pin it down that way, but we could certainly answer any questions. We can drill into our system and see, by percentage, what are the nature of those, and perhaps we could do that for, a year-end report, or certainly for next budget year, expand that. I think it would be interesting to see the nature of the complaints that we're investigating and resolving.
Okay, my next question has to do with parking infraction notices issued. We've issued a ton more than what we did in the last few years. Where are most of those being issued? And where is the corresponding revenue line?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can probably answer that a little bit. We've certainly had success with our summer student program. The summer students spend most part of their day in the lakeshore area during the summer months. It's going to depend on the type of summer we're having. If it's been a rainy, cold summer, we'll probably get less parking infractions. Last year was a hot, warm summer. We had a lot of activity there, so of course the parking violations do go up. But primarily, to you, Councillor Haight, it's the lakeshore areas that the students are enforcing during the summer months.
And the revenue line, where would that appear under other revenues?
It would appear under other revenues. That's correct, Councillor Haight.
Okay, so I guess we've issued more tickets, yet our revenues are down. And in your budget, you think that you can increase this, or at least have the same amount of revenue. We didn't meet it last year, so why are you budgeting that you think you're going to meet it this year?
I think we have a good program through the mayor. You know, we hate to issue parking tickets, but it's about keeping it safe so that avoids conflict, keeps traffic vehicles moving. I think we're back on track. This is where we historically would be. As Mr. Ensland suggests, if it is, it's primarily in the summer, and it really is weather dependent. A rainy weekend, there's basically no tickets issued. But also, too, there's a difference in the fee collected if people pay their ticket right away, or if they challenge it, or if it's late, there's additional costs and so on. I think it's a trend here. I'm confident with the numbers that Mr. Ensland's put in here for 2018.
Okay, I guess my concern with that is the tickets are up 20%, revenue's down. So I'm not sure how you're going to meet that revenue target. It doesn't seem like a realistic number if you ask me.
Just to clarify, the 2017 budget was $50,400. That's what we're projecting again for this year.
Where are you looking? Is that inside other revenues? Or
Yeah,
not?
if I drill down the fines and penalties line, which is where we would generate that, I can elaborate on the other areas, but we had budgeted $50,400, and so it's going to be similar again. The other recovery area is related to, no, I'm sorry, let me clarify that. No, it's just the lines have been further refined here, so no, I can just give you that roll-up figure. Other revenues, we're looking at the same sort of year again for 2018. 110,400 is the total.
Okay, thank you for that. I know we're not allowed to get in the weeds this time, so it makes it harder to see where those revenues are coming from. Under the summary on 471-2, it says maintain a written complaint only format. Mr. Baird, that is so annoying. Can they not enter it in off of the web? Do you know how many of those I get handed, or I have to tell people they have to file a written complaint? And they're like, don't you know that there's a thing called the internet?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have accepted, when we talk about written complaints, what we're looking for is information from the complainant, contact information, details of the information. If it's sent to us via an email and I have that information, that's a written complaint. If it's on a form, we have a form, but it's structured in a way where you can identify the issues and put all the information in and submit it. The form is available online, but if I get an email with all the pertinent information, that's a written complaint, and the reason for that is so that we can have a paper trail if it does proceed to legal proceedings. We have paperwork to deal with that.
Hey, I should have talked to Fritz sooner before I killed all those trees handing out those forms. So, materials and supplies, last question, Mr. Mayor, 4-73. You had a budget of 45.5, came in at 37.1, you're looking for 45.5 again. I'm of the mind to cut that by $8,000, Mr. Baird, why shouldn't I?
Relates to mileage, Councillor Height, increased travel.
Okay, so I'll move the motion to cut it by 5,000, Mr. Mayor.
You want to move that the 45.5 budget be reduced by 5,000?
Yeah.
I'll need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Geisens has seconded discussion on this item. James, I saw your hand first, and Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. If I could just expand on some of that information. That line item is made up of 7 different areas, and we're budgeting a little bit more for, to compare the 2017 actuals to the 2017 budget. Another item there is staff uniforms. We budgeted 3,200, but we only spent 2, and that could be just a result of staffing issues within that area. So it's not just mileage. And if we were to cut 5,000 on there, Mr. Baird would have to cut for example, this uniform line item, and then if he needs the uniforms for 2018, then we don't have the contingency built in, and we end up with a deficit for that line item. So as 2017 does tell a story, however, the 2018 budget that's before you is to prepare for what expenditures we're expecting in 2018.
Councillor Columbus?
Yes, thanks for that clarification from James. Mr. Baird, could that, there was an approved budget of 45,500. We spent 37,100, or that was forecasted actual. Was somebody off work for a period of time or something in the bylaw division that maybe accounted for that difference?
Through the mayor, not specifically. I mean, you know, you buy a uniform and it's good for a couple of years. It could just have been that variable there. The other area that's included in that is livestock loss. We have agricultural livestock loss. There's a compensation. Not to be too specific, but coyote kills and livestock are on the upswing, so it's an adjustment that's been proposed there. It is the same amount that we were underspent, obviously, the forecasted actual, but it's the same figure we're putting forward again for 2018, the 45,500. I would suggest, you know, it is required. If there is a savings, that would be passed on through contingency.
Okay, thanks very much.
To the motion, any other discussion? Motion is to reduce that material and supplies line from 45,500 down to 40,500. Call the question. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 2, 3, 5. That motion is defeated. Now, before we got to the motion, I recognize Brunton and Oliver, and then I'll get to you, Councillor Height. Go ahead, Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. My question kind of relates, Chris, to your memo you sent out on the kitty cat program. Looking at it's interesting that the Humane Society did more work with less money, and I'm trying to remember, what was the difference? Like, their fee was half, and what was the difference in the service?
Through the mayor, the Norfolk Paws,
Yeah.
they would charge $75 per animal,
Right.
and the Simcoe District Humane Society was $35. So that was the price that they submitted. Council agreed to split that budget 50-50 and give them each. So obviously, the Humane Society could do more. How they were funding that shortfall, that's their own decision. That was the price they put forward. But
Well, I thought, was there some vaccination deal in there for one?
there were
Versus the other?
there was the minimum service that was required, and
Right.
if a service provider wished to do more, the different vaccines and so on, they certainly were permitted to do so.
Okay, well, just, and we're going to put 40 in this year to carry on with the
That's
program.
correct. There is $40,000 included in this budget.
Yeah, I just find it, you know, like, when I see the figures here, and I'm saying to myself, well, maybe we should change the rules where they're both providing the $35 service somehow, because we technically, had the Humane Society did everything, we would have saved an extra $13,000, if you do the math. It's just a thought, like, I don't, I mean, they both provide a good service, but I'm just questioning the double the cost, that's all. So, is there any way we could relook at that?
Yeah, that's a good question through the mayor. We received 2 unsolicited proposals last year, and
Right.
council agreed to go with it. Those were the dollar value. If we turn it 180 degrees and suggest, here's what we want you to do, give us a cost per animal, and then we take the lowest price, that's one option.
Yeah.
I think last year was a real trial. It was nice to see, like, 714 animals were dealt with. That's great. They could have done more, but, you know, we can't force them to do more.
Yeah.
But if this budget is approved, we'll be speaking with them, and likely we'll be putting out, instead of waiting to see what prices come in, we'll say, here's the service we want, give us your best price.
Okay, and the other question I had is, like, and I say they're all legit, you receive from a veterinarian a receipt of the services provided, and that's what you pay for?
That's correct, through the mayor. The 714 animals, we have 714 veterinarian certificates and receipts for each animal. That's to validate that they were in fact treated. It's all accounted for.
And are they done by a vet in both cases?
They are, through the mayor, and each